It's spring cleaning time. Got goods to give away? Maybe bulky furniture, gently used clothing, or quality household goods? Call St. Vinny's at 608-278-2920, extension 1, to schedule your free home pickup today. Staff are quick, reliable, and efficient, and they'll pick up goods anywhere across Dane County. Take a load off. Call St. Vinny's today. It's easy to sit back and look for good things in the world, but what if we could be the good? Goodman Community Center has been a force for good for over 70 years. Now Goodman wants to challenge you to be the good. What can you do to make our community, our country, and our world a better place? Learn more about how you can be a part of what's good at Goodman at goodmancenter.org. Together, we can strengthen lives and secure futures. Today on CityCast Madison. As we welcome in spring, we should also prepare for its less welcome companion, severe weather. We're talking thunderstorms, flash floods, and even tornadoes. How ready are you for an extreme weather event? Do you know how to stay up to date with alerts in our region? We sat down with Dane County Emergency Communications and Outreach Manager Andrew Beckett to get best practices for keeping you and your family safe this season. It's Monday, April 14th. I'm Bianca Martin, and here's what Madison's talking about. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us today.
Very happy to be here.
Yes, so as the age-old adage goes, April showers bring May flowers. We get some weather in spring here. So let's talk about what types of severe storms do we get in the Madison area? And what should folks be getting ready for?
Sure. As we get into spring, there's really a few different types of weather that we really start to be concerned about. First and foremost is flooding. We have 2 Great Lakes around Madison, but that also means there's a lot of water that moves through the area. So when we see some of these intense rainfalls that have happened in the past few years, it can very quickly cause flooding on streets, in low-lying areas, parks, things like that. So that's obviously a primary concern right there. But in addition to that, we have severe storms come through that can bring lightning, strong winds, even the potential for tornadoes. And that can cause a lot of hazards very quickly for individuals who are, outside or even in their homes that could put a threat to their safety.
Yes, tornadoes are certainly on the mind. Earlier this year, some southern states had some pretty devastating and deadly tornadoes. So we don't get a ton of tornadoes here, but we are still at risk of getting them from time to time. How concerned should we be here in Madison about tornadoes?
So, Wisconsin averages about 23 tornadoes a year. Some years it's a little higher, some years it's a little lower, but, we do have that tornado risk here in the state of Wisconsin. And really, what people need to be concerned about is, would we have those forecasts that are out there that show that there is that strong potential for tornadoes developing? They need to stay weather aware. That means paying attention to local media, making sure you've got, wireless emergency alerts enabled on your smartphone, maybe have a local weather app downloaded so that you can get notifications if there were to be an alert issued, so that you could then go and seek shelter from the storm. Especially if you're spending time outdoors, you want to make sure you're getting to a sturdy interior space as quickly as possible, trying to put as much distance between you and the outside as you can.
Mm-hmm. And away from windows.
Absolutely. Ground floor interior space, or obviously a basement if you have access to one, are the preferred places. Some of those winds can be over 100 miles an hour if we do see a strong storm like that, whether it be a tornado or straight line winds. And I have seen plenty of pictures of 2x4s punched right through walls that have been caused by strong storms. So that's why we encourage people to kind of look for that interior space, putting as much distance between them and the outdoors as they can.
I remember, a few years ago, I was with my grandma and there was no basement. But then the next step is, like you said, interior. We went into a bathroom that was on the inside, so the further away from the outer walls of your house, the better.
A bathroom, a closet. Those are both good options. It's really just about making sure you're not sharing an exterior wall with whatever room you're in.
Yes. And one of the issues with tornadoes is that they develop so quickly, sometimes in a matter of seconds. So Can you elaborate on what you mentioned earlier about notifications, like how we know that there's a tornado coming?
Sure. So there are several ways to make sure that you're getting notified. And we really encourage people not to rely on a single source of information when it comes to this. Obviously, Dane County has a network of 144 outdoor warning sirens that are located in municipalities throughout Dane County. Those sirens are maintained by our office. And when it comes to severe weather, they're actually triggered by the National Weather Service. So if there is a tornado warning issued, or a warning for a particularly dangerous storm. That would be a severe storm that has high winds and the potential for large hail, but doesn't quite have an actual funnel developing. They will issue a warning, and that will trigger those sirens. Now, obviously, those sirens, outdoor is the key part there. They're meant to be heard by people who are outdoors. You may not hear them if you're inside, and it's very likely you won't if you're in a building that has good soundproofing, especially if you're in something like a downtown building that may have very thick glass to kind of block out some of those city sounds to begin with. So that's why it's important to have backups. That would be items like a NOAA weather radio. That is a device that is tuned into a network of towers throughout the state that triggers an alert based on weather conditions that is issued by the National Weather Service. That will be for the geographic area where you're located. Those devices can be set up. They sound a very loud alarm when they go off. You will hear it in the middle of the night if you have one in your house. I can guarantee it. But they are one of the most important ways to get notifications.
How do you get your hands on one of those? Is it just you?
Yeah, so most major online retailers sell them. Electronic stores, hardware stores frequently will have them in stock too. There's very basic brands, and then you can get them very fancy with a lot of bells and whistles. But really, the critical thing that is most important with them is to make sure they have a battery backup. That option is important because when we have storms, we lose power, and you want to make sure that you're getting alerts. In addition to that, having wireless emergency alerts enabled on your smartphone is an important step as well. Those are those loud alerts that may go off if there is some sort of warning issued in the area. You've probably heard them for things like even Amber Alerts, for severe weather alerts, things like that. Those are a critical early warning tool since so many people rely primarily on a smartphone now for their communication. That is a way to get it right at your fingertips. In addition to that, Dane County has a system that is called RAVE. That is a emergency alert notification system that people can sign up through our website to receive. And that would be another way that they would get those alerts sent to them as well. That can also go to email, not just text. And we also encourage people to, check in with local media. All the TV stations here in this market do a tremendous job of providing coverage live on air when there are storms developing. But, really just pay attention to the weather every day. We have weather apps on our phone. They all show what we can expect in the day ahead, and just make a habit of checking it in the morning because it will show, what is the severe weather risk today? Do I need to rethink my plans to go hiking in a state park somewhere or spending days outside next to one of the lakes? Do I need to be ready and have a plan in place for where I need to go quickly if something does pop up?
You said so many helpful things there, and I wanted to double tap a couple of them, being like, especially about the batteries, like having maybe even a backup battery for your iPhones, because that situation when I was with my grandma, the power did go out. Now I remember thinking, okay, so I've got this much battery left on my iPhone, those sorts of things are real. So backups. And then also, being smart, especially if you're going to be outside looking at the weather. People talk about, the sky's turning green, or, are there kind of signs if you are out and about?
Being observant is obviously important. And when you observe things that make you concerned, it's a good idea to go look for additional information. There are a wealth of sources out there from individuals who are watching for what the weather is going to do. So, the most important thing I can say on that is if you observe something that makes you think, hey, it's getting kind of dark, or I'm hearing some thunder, it's a good idea to go online and see if you can find additional information about what might be happening. There are obviously weather apps you can have, but you can also just go to the National Weather Service website, weather.gov, and look for the Milwaukee Sullivan office, and they will have information about any warnings that are in their coverage area, which includes Dane County.
Amazing resources. I did want to touch on a big contribution to the death toll in recent tornadoes, unfortunately, were car accidents. I've been in my car and it's starting to look a little sketchy, or there is a tornado warning and I'm on the highway and I'm a nervous Nancy. It's no fun. What do you recommend we should do if someone happens to get caught in a storm while driving?
First off, pull over. Don't try to drive through a storm, either whether it's a tornado or severe storm. You have less control over what your vehicle is going to do if there's high winds, heavy rain coming down. And I do want to encourage people to get to a safe location. So I've had many discussions with our colleagues at the National Weather Service over the years. And I want to say that there is no safe place to be outside in a tornado, and that includes inside a car. Though there is things you can do if you absolutely cannot get somewhere else. But, one of the number one things with cars, what are they surrounded by? Glass. There's windows everywhere. And when that debris from trees falling, branches coming down, garbage cans getting thrown around starts to hit a vehicle, the sidewalls of that car might provide some protection. But as that glass breaks, it could also cause potential hazards to you as well. So being inside a vehicle, or the other advice that is often repeated, is getting down in a low-lying ditch, covering your head and your neck as much as possible in order to prevent debris from hitting you. It can help, and that is a safer alternative potentially, but it's still not a very safe location because, when you mention vehicle accidents, the main hazard to people during a storm, any severe storm system, is not necessarily the wind or the rain. It's the debris that's being blown around when that wind and rain hit. It's the trees that are falling over. It's the vehicles that are being tipped over, the glass that's being thrown around. That's why you need to be inside a stable structure, as sturdy of a structure as you can, in a basement or ground floor interior room, in order to put yourself as far away as possible from anything that might be kicked up by that storm. In addition to that, I would note, do not seek refuge under an underpass, especially if you're on something like an interstate, because when those high winds come through, that underpass basically becomes a big wind tunnel. So if you get out of your car and try and hide up under the bridge, there's a very good possibility that you are going to be facing winds that are stronger than if you were just out in the open.
I was just going to ask. I'm glad that thank you for covering that.
Well, and it's a collection space too for debris. I mean, think about where you find leaves if you're ever outside in the fall and you're trying to clean up. They're always tucked in the corner, off to the side, in the little places where they collect. That's what's going to happen underneath an underpass too.
And you don't want to be under there. Before we move on from tornadoes, and I know it's not as frequent as we have our thunderstorms and severe, rainstorms, but it does happen in Wisconsin every year, as you mentioned. I've heard people say about Madison that, when you're on the isthmus, tornadoes don't hit on the isthmus. Have you heard that? The idea that it's like because there's not that much land for it to gain.
I have heard that before. I am not good enough on the science to be able to disprove or prove whether or not that's possible. But I can say with certainty that there is no safe place necessarily from a tornado when it comes geographically. I mean, we have had tornadoes reported in every corner of Wisconsin, and at this point, every month of the year in the state of Wisconsin. So it really can happen at any time. So it is very possible that you could have a tornado pretty much anywhere, even the downtown area. I think the closest one that I can recall in recent years would have been one more towards the East Washington area, further out towards Stoughton Road. There was a tornado that came through that area a few years ago, but it passed right over the area of the isthmus on its way there. I can say that even if there is less of a risk of a tornado potentially touching down in conditions like that, there is still the very strong potential for high winds, flash flooding, any number of hazards that may pop up in the isthmus.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because for folks who are here back in August 2018, they will remember the horrible flooding, that catastrophic looks across the region that caused a ton of damage. I happened to be out of town. I was in DC, and I remember I was like, what is this? That's Madison, and our streets, it looks like a hurricane hit. Let's talk about the floods, because though the 2018 flood for sure brought to light some of those infrastructural issues we face when it comes to being flood ready. Why is Madison, first of all, particularly prone to flooding?
So I would say there's a few different factors that probably come into play there. First and foremost is, while we love them, the lakes are a huge system of water that's moving through the region. You have the Yahara chain, and it is a managed chain. There are locks and dams that exist along the chain, but it takes a long time for water to move through that system. So you mentioned 2018. One of the contributing factors in 2018 was that you had a massive amount of water fall on sort of the northern end of the chain, of the Yahara chain, out towards the Mazomanie Black Earth area, with water that kind of feeds into those tributaries. I think Mazomanie itself had something in the neighborhood of 11 inches in less than an 8-hour period of rain. It is very hard for that level of water to get anywhere else very quickly. It fills the system, it overwhelms it, and it causes problems downstream very fast as that water moves through. When we see long periods of rain, heavy rain, we saw a little bit of it last spring when we had a very wet start to the summer season. The Yahara chain had high water levels kind of heading into sort of that 4th of July period. It then dried up a little bit and we started to slip more towards drought conditions, so the water levels went back down. But the system definitely had high water throughout. And, there was some of the early signs there that there could be flooding. I think that's a major contributor when you're dealing with the isthmus, because you have two large bodies of water that are on both sides, and they're still connected to each other through the Yahara River that brings the water in between the two. And as one stays high, Lake Mendota is almost always at a higher level than everything else downstream, just because of the Tenny Park Dam and lock. As that water level, moves through, you really don't have a lot of depth when it comes to the sewer system, because the isthmus is not that high to begin with. And when we see a large rainfall very quickly in a short period of time, those systems are going to get overwhelmed very quickly. And you're going to see things like street flooding. You're going to see a number of different areas where you're going to face hazards very quickly, because you cannot drive through that space. You can't walk through that space because the water levels have risen.
Mm-hmm. Well, in those situations, what can you do to keep yourself and your belongings safe from flooding?
So a couple different things that I would recommend here. First off is turn around, don't drown. It is really kind of a warning to stay out of floodwaters. Don't drive, don't walk, don't swim in them. For a number of different reasons. First and foremost is just the safety to your personal self and also your health. Floodwaters, you have no idea what they've picked up. There could be bacteria. Other cities have had big problems with human waste. You have really no idea what's in that water, so it's important not to expose yourself to it. In addition to that, when flooding comes through, especially if it's fast-moving water, it can erode the streets pretty quickly. There could be a giant sinkhole just underneath the surface of a street that you didn't know existed and just opened up because of this weather event. And it may have been something that had been building for years, but now it's exposed and you drive your car in there and all of a sudden you find yourself falling in. They had that problem multiple times in Milwaukee over the last decade, where large sinkholes have opened up from the street because of a flooding event that has occurred. So that's another reason why we encourage people not to just try and barrel through, because you don't know what the beneath the surface looks like. And I can tell you, cars do not react well when they are submerged in water. They are pretty much going to be totaled out, and you're going to have a very difficult time with your insurance on that as well. So that's another reason why we encourage people not to drive through them. In addition to that, in your home, if you live on a lower level or have a basement, don't store anything in cardboard on the floor. Invest in some plastic tubs. Try and get anything that's valuable up off the ground so that it is not in direct contact with any area that might flood, especially things like critical documents, anything that's irreplaceable, because, water will always find a way. If it has a path, it will go wherever it wants to go, as long as gravity allows it to. If you have mechanicals in the basement, furnace, water softener, washer and dryer, and you're worried about flooding in that area, make sure that you elevate those, get them up off the ground a few inches at least, so that if you do get a little bit of flooding, they'll be at least somewhat protected. Those are some of the critical things that you can do to kind of protect yourself and your property.
Are you looking for a job at an inclusive workspace? Open Foundation's LGBTQ+ Affirming Career Fair is coming up, and they welcome job seekers looking for just that. They're hosting a free career fair featuring employers committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's on Wednesday, April 23rd from 2 to 6 p.m. at Madison College South Goodman, where you can connect with employers who are actively hiring and value LGBTQ+ inclusion. Here are some of the glowing testimonials from job seekers who attended last year's fair. Quote, "The open career fair was incredibly helpful in my job search. It helped highlight orgs that valued safe space for queer identities." And quote, "The open career fair was the first time I felt comfortable meeting a group of potential employers as myself. Not worrying about having to come out during each conversation was an inexplicable relief." For more details, visit openmadison.org. Jones Dairy Farm makes products that are perfect any time of the day, but they're especially awesome for spring holidays like Easter and Mother's Day. We're talking fully cooked meatballs for easy, amazing meals or delicious appetizers. Naturally smoked hams that feed a crowd and are so easy since they're fully cooked. Out of this world bacon that's dry aged and award winning, and all natural sausage that makes breakfast easy. Jones Dairy is a family-owned company out of Fort Atkinson, Wisconsin, and they've been making mealtimes better since 1889. With high quality and amazing flavor, their products are available at most grocery stores, including Costco. Go check out their product finder on jonesdairyfarm.com to find out where to find Jones near you.
Hi, I'm David Plotz, the CEO of CityCast. We've all set health goals: lose weight, exercise more, eat better. But without a plan, those goals often fade. That may have happened to you. It has definitely happened to me. And that's where Prolon comes in. Prolon's 5-day fasting mimicking diet gives you a science-backed, structured approach to stay on track and see real results. And now Prolon is upping their game with the new Next-Gen 5-day program, delivering the same science-backed benefits in a cleaner, more convenient, and more flavorful format. Prolon is a plant-based nutrition program featuring soups, snacks, and beverages designed to nourish the body while keeping it in a fasting state, triggering cellular rejuvenation and renewal. Next-Gen builds on the original Prolon with 100% organic soups and teas, a richer taste, and ready-to-eat meals. Developed over decades at USC's Longevity Institute and backed by top U.S. medical centers, Prolon has been shown to support biological age reduction, metabolic health, skin appearance, fat loss, and energy. I've been doing the 5-day program, and I feel so much better. I really enjoy the tasty energy bars, the snacks and soups, and the fact that I can enjoy meals, even though the calorie count is super low. The flavors and textures are excellent. An olive oil snack here, broccoli and quinoa soup there, hibiscus tea, a yummy nut bar. It's got the benefits of a 5-day fast, but doesn't have the challenge of doing it with pure liquids. It's a system reset. And also, I know this sounds funny, but it's not. The packaging and directions are fantastic, clear, and well organized and thoughtful. For a limited time, you can be first in line to experience the new Next Gen at special savings. Prolon is offering CityCast listeners 15% off site-wide, plus a $40 bonus gift when you subscribe to their 5-day program. Just visit prolonlife.com/city. That's PROLONLIFE.com/city to claim your 15% discount and your bonus gift. prolonlife.com/city.
We want to talk a little bit more, dig into preparedness. We talked about batteries and radios, but what else should you maybe have at home in case of a disaster? Like, should you have a kit?
I encourage everybody to have an emergency kit in their home. It doesn't have to be super complex. You don't need to go out and buy a 50-gallon preparedness drum. It can be as simple as having 72 hours worth of non-perishable food and water on hand. That's, food that may not require cooking. So very easy things that can be stored for and have a decent amount of shelf life. You don't have to get MREs or anything like that, but, some canned goods, some granola bars, things like that, that probably have a little bit longer of a shelf life on them. Those are important things. You want to make sure you got backups of critical documents in waterproof containers. Make sure that if you have things like your Social Security card at home, birth certificate, insurance policies, any sort of, marriage license, anything like that, that they are protected. They're not just sitting in a file drawer. You want to make sure that they have at least some level of waterproofness to them. In addition to that, first aid kits, a little bit of extra medications. Batteries, you mentioned, is a great thing. not just your traditional double A's, but there are a number of products on the market now that can be, large cell batteries. A lot of people have like the extra cell phone charger packs, the power packs that you can carry around. They make larger versions of those that can actually, power bigger devices in your home if needed to, and will hold a full charge for a decent amount of time. They're not quite to the level of being a generator, but they can provide a power source to you if you need it. Another thing we'd encourage is if you are reliant on a medical assisted device that requires power, include that in your plan. Make sure that you, if you're oxygen dependent or you have some sort of other device that you need to use on a daily basis that requires electricity, you know what you're going to do if you were to lose power, where you could go. Have that plan in place so that you could potentially find an outlet in order to make sure that that item is still usable, especially if it's needed for your health and safety.
And so there's the storm and then the aftermath, which can bring a financial storm. What should people consider for being financially prepared for these potential disasters?
First and foremost is have insurance and make sure that you have the right insurance. So most basic homeowners and renters insurance policies are not going to cover flooding. That is not something that is going to be included in that policy. That typically requires a secondary policy either through private insurance or through the National Flood Insurance Program. You can find more information about that at floodsmart.gov. That is the federal website for the National Flood Insurance Program. And it will kind of walk through some of the products that might be out there in order to make sure that you have protection from potential flood damage. In addition to that, for other types of storm damage like strong winds, tornado damage, check your insurance policy to make sure that it adequately covers the losses you could suffer if you were to have where you live damaged by a storm, so that you are able to recover as much as possible. And, it's difficult to say in these times for many people, but having adequate savings is also important as much as possible, making sure that you have some financial reserves on hand, because it is going to take time if we were to have a major disaster and something like federal aid were to become available. That will take time to make its way through the system. There is a process that's in place there, and there may be some temporary immediate relief, but any sort of, tangible long-term benefit is going to take time to get through. It may take several weeks in some circumstances. So that's why the more you can do to make sure that you have something to help support yourself in place, the better off you're going to be in the long term.
Trying not to be cliche, but save it for a rainy day.
It is a very apt saying when it comes for it, though, is the fact that it is, if we have, in a large population area, a storm come through and a lot of people are affected, there's going to be a lot of people looking for resources at the same time. So the more you can do to be self-sufficient, the safer you're going to be, because it will take time. That's why we encourage people to have at least 72 hours of food and water on hand, is because, while we work with a number of amazing organizations that are able to provide disaster relief, it still takes time to get that material out to people. There are supply chain issues. If you look at some of the hurricanes that went through the southeast U.S. last summer and last fall, one of the biggest issues wasn't necessarily having aid available to people. It was getting it to where it needed to go, because roads are damaged, they're blocked. It makes it difficult for vehicles to get through, semi-trucks, even just basic aid workers to get to areas, because it takes time to clear those roads and make it safe for people to come in.
Speaking of, while we're talking about aftermath, here in Madison, if a disaster, God forbid, knock on wood, add in any sort of spiritual protection from that statement, hit tomorrow, what happens next? Like, who is it that picks up the debris here in Madison? Who's clearing the road? Like, what should we be looking out for, and who should we be calling?
So the information on if you have things like downed trees on your property, things like that, the city would likely put out information about what they're going to do for debris collection. They are not going to be able to come on your property and remove it for you. You're going to have to bring it to probably somewhere, whether that's the curb or a central collection site, that's going to be necessary. You're going to have to probably be responsible for clearing it off of your property yourself. So really, that's first and foremost probably going to be the biggest thing. If you have damage, really you should be talking to your insurance provider. And then if the city were to put out information about where they want you to report it and how, follow that advice there. There may be a central collection number for information set up. A lot of municipalities And counties in the state of Wisconsin utilize 211 through the United Way in order to collect information. But there would be information put out about what they want you to do to report damage as soon as possible. And even if you're working through insurance, if municipalities like Madison are looking for that information, it's important to give them that information, because that helps the state determine whether or not they might try to do things like seek federal disaster assistance, because there are extremely high thresholds when we have storm damage that need to be met before we could start seeking something like federal aid. So it's important to have as accurate and comprehensive numbers as possible, because those are considered as part of the calculation when it comes to that process.
Well, Andrew, before we let you go, I want to make sure to mention that this Wednesday, the county is hosting 2 storm spotter training sessions where the National Weather Service will be training folks interested in how to identify and report storms safely. This is a dream from my childhood. What are the details there?
Sure. So this is National Weather Service Storm Spotter Training. They do this every spring in counties across Wisconsin, where they come in and one of the National Weather Service meteorologists will basically provide a 2-hour training that covers the basics of storm safety, how to identify weather phenomenon, and how to report it to them. This is a free training that's available. We are fortunate to have 2 sessions being offered in the Dane County area on the 16th. The first will be from 1 to 3 p.m. here at our offices in Fitchburg. And you can find the information on our Facebook page with where to go.
So the Dane County Emergency Management Office with y'all. Great.
Correct. 2982 Capeck Road. And then the second will be from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Marshall Fire Department, which is at 119 Industrial Drive in Marshall, Wisconsin. Both sessions are exactly the same. You only have to go to one. You do not have to go to both. But they are a great opportunity for anybody who's interested in being a trained storm spotter and providing information to the National Weather Service when there's severe weather moving through the area.
Andrew Beckett. Beckett is for best. You have been so helpful. This is incredibly helpful. Thank you for all of the preparedness and safety tips. Learned a ton. And let's hope for a fairly uneventful storm season.
I hope so as well. Thank you so much.
That's Andrew Beckett, Dane County Emergency Communications and Outreach Manager. If you want to sign up to be a trained weather spotter, head to our show notes for a link. That's all for today, here on CityCast Madison. I'm Bianca Martin, your host. If you enjoyed the show, why not share this episode with someone who loves a good thunderstorm so they can be prepared? We'll be back tomorrow morning with more stories from around the city. Until then, stay safe.